um, Ashanafi, I'm sorry if I mispronounced, Director of Air Quality Division, Department of Energy and Environment in Washington, D.C. And we do have one other person, Robert Gordon Gawan, but I apologize. I don't see your name on the agenda. So if you would take a few seconds to introduce yourself, please.
Dr. White, I believe that's our in-house technical support.
Oh,
On
well,
Zoom.
thank you for letting me know. Never mind then.
It's an important
Hi, Robert. Yes, so we can go ahead and get started with the session.
Excellent. So I know we have Hannah's slides are up on the screen here. I don't know what you all are seeing on the Zoom. Yeah, Hannah's slides.
Yes, we can see them.
Oh, in the camera.
So
okay, great.
Does that mean I should go first?
Yes.
All right, cool. That's no problem. All right. Here. Is this microphone working? Everyone hear me? Okay, great. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and excited to be here to talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing for environmental justice in the district. I'm Hannah Ashnafi. I'm the Associate Director for Air Quality at DOEE, District Department of Energy and Environment. So I was going to talk a little bit about some of the projects we have going on and how we try to incorporate environmental justice into just about everything we have going on in the Air Quality Division at DOEE. Really, one, talking a little bit about how we incorporate environmental justice into our grants and spending, into our monitoring program, and into our community outreach. So I'll start with talking about some of our funding and how we're trying to make sure we're spending dollars on work that's going to improve air quality in our most overburdened communities. So starting with our Volkswagen settlement funds, we have really been focused on trying to spend those funds on projects that electrify or reduce emissions of especially NOx and diesel particulate emissions in our most overburdened communities. So one of the biggest sources of emissions in the district is, obviously we have a lot of mobile, vehicles. We're looking here at specifically the Ivy City train yard or rail yard, which is, in one of our burden communities that we're focused on, Ivy City. We want to try and do anything we can to reduce asthma and particulate pollution there. So we really focused our spending on trying to focus on these areas. So our DERA funding, our Volkswagen and DERA funding, the project that we have going on right now, which we're finally getting some of the money spent. It's been a little time, but we're working on electrifying and reducing emissions from switcher engines at the Ivy City Rail Yard. They account for about 1% of our total NOx emissions in the district. So we're planning to do 5 repowers of the switcher engines. And so far we have 2 that are going to be coming any day now. It could be in the next couple weeks, and we're planning to do 3 more in the coming years. So we're excited about that. We're also planning to use some of that money to electrify circulator buses that specifically have routes in our overburdened communities. So we have exciting plans for our DERA and Volkswagen funds. In FY22, we received an EPA Multi-purpose Grant, which we're using to partner with Empower DC, which is a local business in the district, local organization in the district that we work with regularly on a lot of environmental justice issues. They are developing an air ambassador program for us to really get residents trained on how to communicate in air quality issues and advocate for air quality concerns that are in their communities. So the air ambassadors that they're working on training are conducting clearing the air workshops within their own communities. So educating residents about what we do, why air quality is important, what actions they can take to reduce emissions. They've held field trips to see places of concern for air pollution, to see what those emission sources look like and what things they should report to DOEE. We accept all of our complaints through 311, and we really rely on community members to try and help us understand what's going on in their lived experiences. So they're working on getting messages out to community members on how to report those issues through 311. They also table community events, created games to share with community members, and they're working on creating a video of their experience, which we'll hope to share soon because storytelling can really be powerful in and should be, included in a lot of our work. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the EPA State Environmental Justice Cooperative Agreement, SEJCA. This is a grant program that was developed throughout the pandemic. We were awarded $200,000 to use at the intersection of environmental justice and COVID. So we actually have a sub-grant out to Breathe DC to work on asthma action plans. It's again going to be focused on our most overburdened communities and reducing asthma for children. So we're really excited about this program. It's one of the few things that we're trying to do for indoor air quality. We don't have a lot of authority there, but we try to help educate and reduce asthma, because that's such an important part of the work we do. In 2022, we received additional funding from EPA. This was meant, the funding was really meant to try to improve our air quality monitoring federal reference system. So we have 5 air quality monitors throughout the district. This funding was meant to really improve those systems, and we decided instead of using it on the existing monitoring stations that we have in place, let's use it to put a new air quality monitoring station in one of our most overburdened communities. And this is going to be in Ward 8 in the district. And we really don't have right now a good sense of what the actual air quality is in those neighborhoods, right? We have sort of an average of air quality throughout the district, but not in our most overburdened communities. So we're really excited to be putting a new air quality monitoring station in Ward 8. We've done some outreach already, some community outreach to try to talk to community members about potential locations, trying to explain what exactly we're trying to monitoring, how it's going to help residents, and, get ideas for locations. Where do you want it? We want to put it where our residents are and where we're getting the best representative exposure. So we've been doing a lot of outreach on the Ward 8 monitor, and we will be deciding on a location soon. We're still accepting some comments. We've actually did an initial round of citing locations, and we went to the community and said, these are the locations that we found and we're proposing. And people came back to us and said, well, you're not looking in these areas. Why aren't you looking further south in areas that, we aren't usually as represented? So we went back out, looked at more locations, and now we're looking at a few different options for consideration. We were also awarded $500,000 to expand community monitoring in our overburdened communities through the American Rescue Plan. This is our competitive community monitoring grant. And this application, this grant I'm really excited about. We haven't quite gotten started on the project yet. We were just awarded the funds. We just received the funds really, I think a few weeks ago, actually. It's pretty recent. So this project, we had about 15 different partners that were included on our initial proposal that we're planning to work with on this project. And it's going to be testing out a new shared governance model. Us at DOE, we shouldn't be the only ones making the decisions. We really want to bring our community members into the decision making, bring them to the table. So we're going to put out a request for applications for a community-based organization to manage that shared governance structure and have people empowered to make decisions about air quality in their own communities. And we're planning to locate 3 park bench monitors that are going to take measurements and educate the public about air quality. We're also going to include a community storytelling element, which is the power of film and storytelling in understanding the experiences of people and air quality in their communities is so important. So we are excited to include the combination of data and people's lived experiences. And we're going to combine all of that into an online mapping tool as well. So it's a really exciting project. We're going to have a request for applications coming out soon. So we're really excited to get started on it. And this second to last, I'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do for our hyperlocal monitoring program. This is going to be, this is a mobile monitoring car. We have partnered with Aclima. They did a pilot in the district in mid-June for about 2 weeks. And we started our pilot. We wanted to make sure we were capturing air quality in our most overburdened communities. So we picked 3 communities. They were Buzzard Point, Ivy City, Brentwood, and Mayfair, where we piloted the car driving around for 3 weeks. And we're now waiting for Aclima to process some of that data. Once we have that, we're going to present to the public. It will probably be around fall where we'll be doing more community outreach with Aclima on this. And we're going to be using some of this data to site some more stationary monitors, and we're hoping to do a bigger expansion for 2024. So very exciting. And last, we've really been trying to focus on, incorporating community outreach in all of this. So a few things that we had going on this summer here for Air Quality Awareness Week, we did a few different outreach events. So on the top left, we were actually handing out magnets of the Air Quality Index at different metro stations, and that really came in handy because we did this in May right before all of those wildfires came in June. So we were trying to make sure everyone understands how the air quality index works and what it means for your health and how to make decisions on based on the air quality index. On the top right, this is an event that we did in collaboration with COG, where they set up a bubble to show emissions from gas-powered lawn equipment. I think it was lawnmowers in there. And we're also offering rebates for people who are trying to get rid of their gas-powered lawnmowers and upgrade to electric. So we have some exciting programs there. And on the bottom, we have a picture of one of our newer monitoring staff, Kane, who is doing a lot working with different high schools. Specifically here, this is students from Ron Brown High School. They went to Kingman Island and learned to test out some of our new low-cost sensors. We have these little handheld plume monitors. So we're trying to work on educating students on how air quality is important and how to conduct their own air quality monitoring. So that's what I have. Thank you. All right. Any questions, or maybe I should kick it off to the next person and then we'll do questions at the end, Dr. White?
Yes, let's do questions at the end. Thank you so much, Hannah. So
See what else we have.
are you all able to share your screen? Do you have share screen capabilities?
I can share my screen, but I did send it in ahead of time. Which way do you want me to do it?
It'll be easier if you share your screen.
Okay, let me set it up then. I mean, I don't know what order you're doing this in, so I don't want to jump in front of somebody else.
No, that's fine. We're just powering through since we lost so much time.
Share screen. I have double screen, so hopefully host disabled participant screen sharing, so I can't do it.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, luckily I called a few minutes ago. So I figured that would probably be a problem. So hang tight really quickly. And I believe this is going on for a few sessions, so I don't think it's just us. So I do apologize again. Okay, do you want to try now?
I will try again. Share screen. 2. Hopefully you can see my screen there. Can you see my screen?
No, actually I can't. Not quite yet. They're working through it.
Okay.
In the room.
There you go.
Okay. You got my slide up there? Okay.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
No problem. Ken Ratzman, Assistant Director, New Jersey DEP in the Air Quality Regulation Program. 12 minutes was going to be tight before, so if I talk fast, I apologize. We are kind of unique in New Jersey. Not only do we have an EJ law, we have an EJ rule with specific requirements. And unlike a lot of the presentations on EJ, there's not going to be a lot of pretty pictures. It's going to be a lot of text. And there's going to be a lot of material to cover with words. So my overview, what I'm going to cover today, and by the way, I could spend about 2.5, 3 hours on the EJ rule. I'm going to try to cover the key pieces for the AIR program in about 12 minutes. Overview is step 1 is an applicability determination. Does EJ apply to your particular facility? Is it located in an overburdened community? Is it a covered type of facility for the EJ rule? What is the permit action that we're evaluating here at DEP that triggers or not an EJ analysis? Once you do trigger, what do you have to do? Well, you have to do an environmental justice impact statement and a meaningful public participation. And I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. And from there, the department decides, is this a project that we want, that we can approve? Do we move forward or not? And I'll touch on that. So what is an overburdened community? And it could be any of the following three. At least 35% of the households qualify as low income, 40% identify as a minority, or 40% are households that have limited English proficiency. And so that is from the census data, and that's, are you in an overburdened community? Now, that alone is not how we define an overburdened community, but that makes you be eligible to be an overburdened community. Oops. Okay, so we identified in the department 26 stressors that could identify your particular community as being overburdened. And if you have a disproportionate number of stressors that are overburdened, you are declared an overburdened community. And I said there's 26 of them. You'll notice 9 of them are air related. And I'm going to highlight these 9. Ground level ozone. How many days are we above the air quality NAAQS standard? Fine particulate matter, same thing. How many days above the NAAQS standard? We have cancer risk considerations from diesel, and that's a challenge unto itself. Cancer risk from air toxics, excluding diesel. And then we have non-cancer risk from other air toxics. How many permitted air sites are in a particular community? Is it a higher than normal number in a particular area? Traffic, the cars, light and medium duty is broken out from the heavy duty trucks. So there's 2 criteria there. And then railways, rail miles per square mile. And we all know railways are a challenging stressor. There are another 7 stressors, 7-8 stressors that are associated with water, solid waste, and contaminated sites. I'm not going to spend much time on these. And then there's another 8 or so that are associated with public health, environmental, and social considerations. And some of these are interesting. How much tree canopy is out there? What is the recreational open space? People frequently think about environmental stresses as how much air, water, waste is in my community. But open space is an environmental consideration that we looked at in this rulemaking. So what types of facilities are covered by this EJ rule? All major sources of air pollution. So essentially any Title V permit is going to be a covered facility. Any incinerator or resource recovery facilities, regardless of size, is going to be looked at in this venue. Large sewage treatment plants, transfer stations or solid waste facilities, recycling facilities that receive 100 tons of recyclable material per day. And I thought that was a huge number, but when I started looking at some of these, it doesn't take all that much to trigger that 100 tons. Scrap metal facilities has been on the radar for EPA, and no individual program, at least in New Jersey, DEP had a good handle on who our scrap metal facilities are. So we had a lot of homework to do on that. Landfills, past closed and future and currently active. And then medical waste incinerators, except those that are attached to hospitals or universities. What permit action triggers an EJ analysis? Essentially, any new facility that is in one of those 8 categories is going to require an EJ analysis. An expansion of a facility, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the media that is getting the permit mod. So facility is looking to do some kind of air permit mod, but there's really no increase in emissions, but it has a land use impact. It's potentially an EJ covered activity. And interestingly enough, and this is one of the challenging areas, renewals of Title V air permits are also included in the EJ analysis. I mean, and there's been a lot of talk over the years about the renewals don't cover all the new issues. They don't necessarily cover the rules. And we've always taken a relook at everything, but they felt strongly in the rulemaking and through the lawmaking that renewals should be included. They're not handled exactly the same as the others, but they are clearly a covered activity. All right. So what does it mean? You're a covered facility. You're in an EJ area. You have the type of permit that requires a permit, and you have some kind of expansion or some kind of increase in emissions, let's say. So the facility must prepare an environmental justice impact statement. And it's the potential environmental and public health stressors associated with the facility. So you may or may not be in an area that's stressed for one reason or another, but if there's any stressor associated with this action, you have to evaluate it. And again, as I said earlier, it may be an air permit, but it may be a land use stressor that you have to evaluate. So it's a cross media, cross the department, take a look at the facility. Any adverse environmental or public health stressor that cannot be avoided in the permit, if the permit is granted, has to be evaluated. So if there's an increase, they have to evaluate an alternative analysis. An EJIS may require supplemental information. It's required when a community is already subject to an adverse cumulative stressor, or where the facility is bumping the community up above one of those existing stressors. So it's potential that maybe the community didn't have a significant number of air permits in the area, but by bringing this additional facility or two on, it may bump them up and they have to do some additional analysis. And I think this next item about meaningful public participation is the most critical piece of the rulemaking. The applicant, not the department, the applicant must conduct a public hearing in the overburdened community to present their fingings of their EJIS. The public notice has to be in multiple forms and multiple locations. We're highly encouraging multiple language for various considerations. And there's a minimum 60-day public comment period. And the applicants, again, the facilities, must prepare a response to comment document, similar how we would do it in the air world for responding to comments we receive. So this all happens before an application gets acted on by the department. So this all occurs prior to the department even determining administrative completeness. We don't do our min review or technical review until they've gone through this whole process. So the facility goes through the EJIS, they do their public hearings, they do back and forth, they prepare a document, and they submit everything to the department. The department considers the EJIS and all the supplementary information, including the response comment document, and then it has to do an evaluation. Does this make sense? Is this fair? Are they causing more of a burden? If the facility cannot, if the facility can avoid a disproportionate impact to the overburdened community, the department would impose permit conditions necessary to ensure that disproportionate impact remains avoided. So if we have to put special conditions in, we have to put special conditions in. That's where it comes down. If the facility cannot avoid a disproportionate impact, the department would. And it says would, but we could deny an application for a new facility unless it's demonstrated it will serve a compelling public interest in the overburdened community. And this is a big reach, or a big lift, I should say, not reach. It literally has to be a public interest within that community. It can't be just for the public good. It can't be for the state as a whole. It has to be public interest of that overburdened community. For expanded facilities and major source facilities, the authorization to proceed may occur, but additional conditions to address facility impacts and public health stressors will be added to the permit. And we have a special kind of niche on the permit renewals. They have to avoid impacts and avoidance. If not feasible, then the facility has to identify stressors to the overburdened community. It is not as hard a hammer, but there is a lot of work that has to be done and evaluated. The renewals are tricky because they've already been established, they've been there, but there is requirements for something like a dust mitigation plan or a risk minimization plan to address some of these impacts. And lastly, we have this localized impact control technology. There's RACT out there, there's BACT, there's LAIR. We now have a new one, it's called LICT. I hate the acronym, but that's what it is. But we're looking for an objective standard for major source components based on existing air program standards. So you have that site that hasn't made any NSR changes in 25 years. We know there's a potential for reductions there if they put a control device on. If it is economically feasible, it may be required. So we're taking a look back on some of those NSR sources that haven't been touched in years. And yes, they don't have to do anything based on the existing rules on the books, but based on the EJ, they may need to do additional work. I'm just going to give you a slide with some of the content and availability. Our EJ law is at that site. We had an executive order which was put in place about 2 years ago, and we have a rule effective as of March of 2023. I'm also going to share a link to our EJ mapping assessment and protection EJ map tool, which identifies our overburdened communities and gives all the layers of information of why they're overburdened. On a separate tab, you can also find out the different layers of what we think are covered facilities. I know I flew through that. I was trying to get through it. 12 minutes was a challenge to begin with, but I am looking forward to questions. So I'm going to unshare.
Actually, before you unshare,
If I can figure out how to do that.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Next we have
Dr.
Angela.
White, we have a question in the room if you're entertaining those at this point. Or
We're going to hold questions until the end because we have some presenters that have other obligations. So we're just going to push through and then questions will be for later. Thank you.
Hello, I'm just trying to share my screen. 1 minute.
We got it.
You got it? Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. I'm Angela Marconi. I am the Division Director for Air Quality at DENREC, which is the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control for the state of Delaware. So I'm just going to skip this, and you'll just we'll see it when we see it as I go through these slides. So looking at how Delaware is doing with air quality, the American Lung Association's report card shows kind of the progress and where we are with the different counties. For 2023, Newcastle County came out of F for ozone. We were really excited about that. 2023 ozone season has been rough, so that D probably will not stand. But we were also excited to see an A in Sussex County and continue with a B in Kent as we continue to always look to improve the air quality. With particulate matter, we're doing okay. Fire smoke a few years ago that influenced the 2023 grade as a B in Newcastle County. But in putting this information together, I realized that the Salisbury, Maryland metro area is ranked as one of the cleanest metro areas for particulate matter by the American Lung Association. And that metro area does include Seaford, Delaware, and that's actually where the particulate monitor is for that metro area. So that's very good news because we do know that there are EJ communities in and around Seaford, Delaware. In terms of exceedances, we had a great year in 2022, excuse me, with 0 exceedances. We have had 4 for ozone this year. They were all orange days. And for particulate matter, we had 10, and they varied in color from orange up. All of the PM exceedances, both in 2023 and 2021, were due to transport of wildfire smoke. So we take a lot of actions. We're always trying to improve the air quality. But when we get into a situation with the transport of the smoke, there's not really an action we can do. It really pivots into communication and making sure that people know what the AQI means, how to get the information. So this is a campaign that we put together actually at the end of ozone season in 2022 with some extra grant money we had from a multi-purpose grant. It was a multimedia outreach campaign, which included print media, advertisements on YouTube, as well as billboards to try and that was throughout the state, to try and get people aware of what the AQI is and Delaware's website for information, which is de.gov/AQI. So briefly, I use a lot of different names to describe who I am. I call us Delaware, but we are the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. We also call ourselves DENREC. Our department includes natural resources divisions as well as the environmental control division. So that's Parks and Rec in the state, as well as Fish and Wildlife, and then the environmental control divisions, which are broken up by media. So the EJ work that we're doing throughout DENREC is throughout all those different areas. And in the past year, we really started on developing a formal EJ office, which included an appointment of an EJ coordinator, who is Dr. Katara Moore, and we are so thankful to have her on board. She's really been working on unifying procedures throughout the environmental control divisions and really all of DENREC, and working on training all staff on EJ history and considerations and what it really means, because it's great to have the division directors working on EJ, but I think it's something that really needs to be infused, because there are so many people at the staff level doing work every day. And so it needs to be on their radar as they're making decisions while they're out doing inspections and writing permits and looking at regs we should develop, all of that. So to keep it really in everyone's consideration. And then also work that's being done in our Climate, Coastal, and Energy Office. EJ includes equitable access to renewable energy sources and energy efficiency. So we have weatherization assistance programs, as well as low to moderate income solar programs, and a program called A Tree for Every Delawarean, which is working on planting 1 million trees throughout Delaware. And there are funds available for that. And we're trying to really get young people involved in that effort as well. With our Parks and Recreation area, we recently had a ceremony to recognize and dedicate Jason's Beach at Trap Pond. Jason's Beach was a segregated area of Trap Pond. So recognizing the history there and really commemorating it was an important step for us. Parks and Rec is also taking steps to work on the grants that they issue to make sure that they are making opportunities available for communities based on social vulnerability indexes, and increasing access to the park system through passes that can be checked out through the library system, as well as paid internships. We have a mapping tool that is being used not only by DENREC, but by other state agencies within Delaware as well, to identify the term that is used in the mapping tool is equity focus area. But this is really making sure that we're all using the same information while we're making decisions as a unified state, and the mapping tool is available publicly. So we're excited to be moving forward with that as well. We're looking at all different opportunities to enhance the EJ work that we're doing, including what we're doing with enforcement funds. I'm sorry, are my slides changing?
No, Angela, we're seeing the.
Oh my God, you guys must think I'm crazy.
Oh, look at all
I
those.
apologize.
Those were great.
I apologize for that. Sorry. Working on facility-led outreach, including the development of community advisory boards, as well as broad and targeted communications through our public notices, getting translated notices available on the internet. We have listserv opportunities for people to sign up to get direct notifications, as well as using things like billboards. And during the wildfire issues, we were using traffic signs. We were able to get on the display that our Department of Transportation uses on big roadways like I-95 to notify people about things that they should be concerned about with the high PM that we saw during those transport issues. So improving access, we're improving our website. I know where things are on the website, but that doesn't mean that everyone can find them. So making sure that there are pages that are easy for people to use and navigate, as well as creating like infographics so people can understand our procedures, which we recognize are complicated. So these are some of we do have an environmental justice website that we developed to try and help people navigate things, as well as pages like Be the First to Know with special links to different areas, and infographics to help people understand the approval process that a permit goes through. As far as legislative developments, we had a greenhouse gas bill that passed this year, and our goal is to get to net zero by 2050. We've had a cumulative impacts bill introduced, and the department's been working closely with a stakeholder group on that bill. We're really excited about that. An enhanced public notice bill passed, and we had an expansion of our energy office as well. In air, we completed an update of our inspection and maintenance vehicle testing, which unifies the program statewide. And we're working on the Advanced Clean Car 2 regulation because so much of our NOx and greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. It's really important that we consider that as a path forward. And then we're working on a project to expand our ability for hyper-local monitoring as well. So that's all I have. I apologize. I didn't realize the slides weren't advancing. I'm sorry.
Appreciate it, Angela.
Thank you, Angela. So next, I believe we have Danielle. Is Chris there in person?
Yes. Hi, Dr. White.
Hi. So I'm not sure if Chris or Danielle wants to go next.
I'm happy to go next. I don't know if my slides are loaded up here. So Angela, I just sent them to you. Would you be able to do me a favor and share my slides?
I can try, and maybe this will give me a chance to redeem myself. Let's see.
While Angela works on that, I'm Chris Hoagland. I'm the director of the Air and Radiation Administration at MDE. I'm Angela's and Hannah's counterpart for Maryland. So
I don't see your email, Chris.
Oh, you know, it might be still working through the tubes.
Okay.
Chris, you can send to me also if you want to give it a try.
All right.
In the meantime, Danielle, do you have your slides ready?
Yes, I do. Let me try to share my screen.
Okay, I'll go next then.
Thank you.
Is everyone able to see it?
Yeah, if you could zoom
Yes.
a bit.
Okay, perfect. Video for a little bit. Good morning. My name is Danielle Sims. I'm the program manager of the Office of Environmental Justice at Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. Thank you for the invitation to be on this panel today. So is this advancing? I want to make sure before I proceed.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I will go off video just to see.
It is, but it's advancing, but it's quite small.
Okay.
If you could zoom in.
You're not in presentation mode, that's all.
Okay. Why is it not? Let me try to share my other screen that has it up. Is that better?
That's
Yes.
great.
Okay, perfect. Well, today I will give an overview of environmental justice at DEQ as well as in Virginia and share some tools and resources and projects we've been working on. So in 1994, President Clinton's Executive Order 12898 on environmental justice was published. After that, in 2000, DEQ initiated a campaign to educate and train staff about environmental justice. And the AIR program took the lead on this and worked with EPA environmental justice staff and coordinated efforts predominantly on complaint investigations. In 2007, DEQ assigned an EJ coordinator to work with agency program managers and EPA. And in the following year, DEQ worked with EPA Region 3 to develop the first risk-based inspection strategy in the country. And EJ played a large role in that strategy and EPA's approval. Basically, facilities located within or adjacent to environmental justice area are included as reasoning to increase inspection frequency. Also in 2008, DEQ introduced environmental justice into the agency's inspection strategy for all of its core programs, water, air, solid waste, as well as hazardous waste. In 2009, DEQ established a partnership with EPA, Norfolk State, and Hampton University. And DEQ recruited students for paid summer internship programs and partnering with those universities to work along environmental professionals in the AIR program. This has been a huge success and is still continued to this day. The main goal of this program, of both of these programs, was to attract minorities into natural resources professions. Switching gears to the environmental justice laws, 4 environmental justice laws, bills passed into law effective July 1st, 2020. First, the Virginia Environmental Justice Act, which I will talk about more in depth in a minute. Second, a law that established a Council on Environmental Justice in Virginia State Code, and 2 laws that updated DEQ's policy statement. 1 law defines environmental justice and adds to our policy statement to further environmental justice and enhance public participation in the regulatory and permitting processes as our list of purposes. The other law adds the list of purposes for the agency to ensure the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, faith, disability, or income, with respect to the administration of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So more in depth on the Virginia Environmental Justice Act of 2020. It is legislation that is a page long that establishes definitions for environmental justice concepts and an environmental justice policy into state code. The environmental justice policy is that it is the policy of the Commonwealth to promote environmental justice and ensure that it is carried out throughout the Commonwealth with a focus on environmental justice communities and fence-line communities. Key definitions in the Act include a definition for environmental justice that is shown here. This is the same definition that is in President Clinton's Executive Order 12898. There's a definition for fair treatment, meaning the equitable consideration of all people, whereby no group of people bears a disproportionate share of any negative environmental consequence resulting from an industrial, governmental, or commercial operation, program, or policy. And there's also a definition for meaningful involvement, meaning that the requirements that the affected and vulnerable community residents have access and opportunities to participate in the full cycle of the decision-making process about a proposed activity that will affect their environment and health. And decision makers will seek out and consider such participation, allowing the views and perspectives of community residents to shape and influence the decision. Talking more of an overview of the Office of Environmental Justice. The Office of Environmental Justice at DEQ was created April of 2021. In December of 2021, the office hired 4 regional coordinators to cover the 6 regions in the state. And currently we have a program manager, myself, and 4 regional coordinators. The mission of our office is to incorporate fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people into development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies across all of DEQ's programs. And basically that's our everyday is basically sharing info between environmental justice community leaders and our DEQ colleagues. So a lot of the conversations that we have back and forth are what concerns or questions an affected community may have. That may be a process question, a question about health, truck traffic, jobs, and interacting with the permit applicants and our DEQ colleagues and community leaders to share that information. Another is sharing how communities can provide input into laws, regulations, policies, and permits, and providing in detail the public participation process, especially with permits. So here are a few initiatives that our office has been working on. One is our Virginia Pacific GIS tool called Virginia EJ Screen Plus, which I will share a little bit more on that on the next slide. We've been doing enhanced outreach to communities living near facilities for engagement and participation in decision-making processes, as well as proactive outreach before there is concerns. We are working on some environmental justice education and training programs. For example, we hosted a webinar this past March on grants available to environmental justice communities, as well as how community groups can apply for federal funding. And lastly, we have an EPA-funded project in Newport News in Norfolk to study and reduce the potential health risks associated with coal dust coming from the nearby coal terminals, storage and transportation facilities. This project, called the Tidewater Air Monitoring Evaluation Project, or TAME, measures and analyzes toxic metals and particulates in the air, and will use this information to conduct health risk assessments in 2 Pacific neighborhoods. So a little bit more on Virginia EJ Screen Plus. It's a Virginia Pacific tool, public facing on our website. The information in the tool is organized by census block group currently. There are 2 environmental justice layers, 1 layer for low income and 1 layer for community of color, based on the Virginia Environmental Justice Act definition. Going more in depth on the 2 layers, low-income communities are any census block group in which 30% or more of the population is composed of people with low income. Low income is defined as having an annual household income equal to or less than greater of an amount equal to 80% of the median income of the area in which the health school is located, and 200% of the federal poverty level. So here, census block groups, shades of purple, designate severity across the state. For communities of color, this layer shown here, it is a population made up of individuals who identify as belonging to one or more of the following groups: Black, African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, other non-white race, mixed race, Hispanic, Latino, or linguistically isolated over the statewide average of 37.8% overall. And shades of red here display severity with that as well. Also, the tool has DEQ media layers that can be overlaid with the environmental justice layers. For example, there's an outreach resource layer with community centers, places of worship, etc., and different other places that can be potential places to flyer or interact with community members or host events, etc. But definitely all of our permits are within these larger groups of layers here. Also, we have EPA EJ screens layers available for viewing or to run a report, as well as redlining polygons in a few urban areas. And then lastly, we have the capability to run a report for a radius around the facility or around the GPS point as well. And now lastly, I'll talk a little bit more about the environmental justice permitting guidance in Virginia. DEQ drafted guidance to create procedures to ensure fair treatment and meaningful involvement throughout DEQ's permitting processes. This guidance outlines a permit evaluation process for all permitting actions at DEQ, as well as establishes processes for further evaluation of permits of particular concern to environmental justice communities. An informal public comment period for this draft environmental justice permitting guidance was open from mid-March until May 1st of this year. DEQ has reviewed and considered all comments, and a formal public comment period will be held after further internal review. And there's a link here to that document as well. So the guidance outlines the following procedures to ensure permits within environmental justice communities. 1, do not cause a disproportionate share of any negative environmental consequences. 2, affected community residents have access and opportunities to participate in the full cycle of decision-making processes about a proposed permit that will affect their environment or health. Then 3, decision makers will seek out and consider public participation, allowing the views and perspectives of community residents to shape and influence the decision. And this flowchart here is a visualization of that process. Step 1 here, when DEQ receives a permit, my office's staff will use Virginia EJ Screen plus EJ layers to evaluate whether or not those permits are located within an environmental justice community based on Virginia EJ Screen plus. The step 2, we will evaluate whether or not the permit is a permit of concern. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. If a permit is a permit of concern, the Office of Environmental Justice would conduct meaningful involvement outreach, such as informational meetings, tours, site visits, etc. Also, DEQ will evaluate disproportionate impact by each media, and there is a specific process for air permits, water permits, and land permits of evaluating that disproportionate impact. If it is determined that a permit has disproportionate impact, DEQ will actively engage permit applicants to voluntarily take action to either minimize and mitigate any potential disproportionate share of impacts from the proposed action, or DEQ will evaluate the need for any additional environmental monitoring or enhanced compliance scrutiny.
All right, Danielle, I'm so sorry. We have to cut your presentation short.
No worries. I was gonna go a little bit more in depth on that, but we can stop here.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have to move on to Chris and then the lunchtime plenary.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'm putting it up there, Chris. Just give me a second.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, so I'm Chris Hoagland, the Air Director for Maryland, and we are at time, so I'll be quick. So here in Maryland, we're fortunate to have really great resources to advance environmental justice, including our hosts for this symposium, the Siege Center here at the University of Maryland.
I don't see the slides, sorry.
Are they up now?
Let's see.
Not quite yet, Ken. Oh, there
There we
are.
go. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, just a little delay.
That's great. Thanks so much, Ken. If you could move us to the next slide. So I'll cover, I might not cover all these things since we're at time, but we'll jump right into the next one. So first, our Governor Westmore, has told us to leave no one behind, and he hired a very active and ambitious Environment Secretary, Serena McElwain, who's a national voice on environmental justice. You can see her in the middle on the right. She has declared environmental justice her #1 priority. She is out externally talking about how much more needs to be done and getting us more resources and attention to the issue. And I can tell you from experience that she's very active internally, telling us that much more needs to be done to pursue environmental justice. You can see her at 2 in session 2E with some other Maryland cabinet secretaries. And she's very active. She's visiting communities, having listening sessions to hear from communities about what their individual priorities are and bringing them back to us for follow-up, and also pushing for enhanced financial and legal resources for us to do more. Next slide, please. Climate change and climate justice are, of course, key topics here. We have a very ambitious law. I won't go through all of this, but the key to our strategy to achieving our most ambitious goals in state law is that we need to invest in communities, right? And we need to invest in the communities that have not been invested in, and the communities that have been overburdened, especially by air pollution. We put out with the University of Maryland a study of how the state could get to our climate goals. That's out and open for comment now. You can go to our website, mde.maryland.gov, or marylandsclimatepathway.org to participate in that process. Next slide. So we've been building community partnerships with overburdened and underserved communities around the state. We've been launching partnerships on community air quality monitoring. We've been pursuing different ways to do targeted enforcement and inspection initiatives in overburdened communities. We've done targeted pollution reduction programs. Hannah talked about the DERA grants. We use DERA as a tool to address diesel pollution in communities surrounding the ports in Baltimore. And we are trying to get a lot better about greater collaboration on permit processes and other processes. That's an area where we need to do much more work to give communities more agency in our processes within the department. Next slide, please. So just one example, the Curtis Bay community in Southwest Baltimore is an overburdened community with a high concentration of industrial sources. If you want to learn more about that, you should actually leave here and catch the end of session 1B. Several leaders from the Curtis Bay community are on a panel right now. They've built a very impressive community air monitoring network. There's a very high concentration of multi-pollutant air sensors backed up by field work by community members. They are doing intensive measurement of many pollutants in many different places around the community that are enabling us to do very sophisticated analysis to understand how different sources in the community are contributing to different air quality problems. Gathering lots of data at once has proved very powerful, especially in a community like Curtis Bay, where there are lots of different sources contributing to air quality problems. So we've been supporting that. Our scientists are helping with the equipment and analyzing the data, and we intend to incorporate the results of that into our permit processes in the area. Next slide, please. Like DC, we also received a $500,000 grant from EPA to do community air monitoring. We'll be building out more air monitoring in 3 communities. The town of Cheverly, which is in Prince George's County, and the topic of session 2C this afternoon. Curtis Bay, which I just mentioned, and Turner Station, which is on the other side of Baltimore Harbor from Curtis Bay, and is the topic of a session tomorrow. We're working with the communities and with UMD SEJCA to develop tailored approaches for each community based on what each community wants to measure and how. And then the department will purchase the equipment, and UMD will help run the networks and analyze the data. Next slide, please. We also have a mapping and screening tool. Maryland law, our climate law, defined overburdened community, underserved community. We have 24 demographic environmental health indicators built into our tool. It's out for beta right now, so if you want to use it and give us comment, we welcome that. You cannot see the links on the screen very well here, but they'll be in the presentation. And it's a required tool for permit applications through our law that established requirements for EJ to be considered in permits, which I'm talking about shortly. Next slide, please, I think. Yeah, so in recent legislative changes, last year, the Climate Solutions Now Act passed, in addition to establishing climate change, very ambitious climate change goals and a framework to achieve them. It also defined the demographic and environmental health criteria that we use to identify focus communities, on a process to establish and track goals for investment in particular communities. And then House Bill 1200 requires EJ scoring to be incorporated into our permit processes. Applicants have to use our screening tool to determine a score for the location where they're proposing to put a facility. That information has to be included in the permit, and it's a tool for greater community engagement and better pollution controls. What it doesn't do is what we've heard some other states' laws have done, which is give the department specific authority to act upon that information in a different way than we would have. For example, by imposing additional permit requirements, or in the case of, I think I heard Ken, you say that you guys maybe even potentially denying permits based on that information. However, this year there was a bill that would have done that. House Bill 840, the department supported it. It didn't make it through. That's common in Maryland. It usually takes good ideas a couple tries to get to the General Assembly. So we're looking forward to the General Assembly reconvening in January when we can take that issue up again. And I believe that's the end of my slides. Thanks, guys, so much for the extra time.
Thank you, Chris. So I know we're pushing it, but there was a question at one point in the audience.
You're going to post the...
I'll stick around for the next 20 minutes or so if need be.
Actually, it was just, oh, this is loud. It was just going to asking to show the screen again for the screening tool. But if this is going to be posted on the YouTube channel, then no worries about that. So I can just look at the recording. This is from the gentleman who was presenting that the last few slides came up before that.
I sent my presentation in, so if they're posting it, great. Otherwise, you can call me and I could lead you in the right direction too.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Everyone who is in person, if you could please head over to the lunch plenary session in the grand ballroom.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And thank you to our presenters of today.